When Marvin lost his wife at 69, everyone said the same thing. You've still got time to meet someone new. It's not too late to fall in love again. He nodded, smiled, even believed it for a while. 2 years later, he started dating again. She was kind, gentle, easy to be around. They laughed, took long walks, shared warm meals and soft silences. But something felt different. The quiet peace he had spent years building in solitude began to slip away. His routines shifted, his sleep changed, and the silence he once treasured now felt crowded. The companionship he thought he wanted came wrapped in tension he didn't expect. One night, he sat alone in his living room and said something I'll never forget. I didn't feel alone when I was by myself. I felt alone when I had to lose myself to keep someone else happy. That line stayed with me, because for many men over 65, love isn't the same thing it once was, and sometimes the bravest choice you can make is to stay single, not out of bitterness, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Let's talk about why. First, conflict feels different after 65. When you're young, arguments are part of the rhythm. You raise your voice, slam a door, sleep on it, wake up, and move on. The emotional skin is still thick. The heart still bends. The recovery is fast. But after trees, it's different. More different. Disagreements no longer bounce off your chest, they settle in your bones. Your nervous system? Slower to reset. Your energy? No longer limitless. And something as small as a comment taken the wrong way can echo in your mind for days. Your body doesn't process tension the way it used to. One disagreement can rob you of sleep. It can leave your chest tight. It can make silence in the room feel louder than words ever did. You notice it more when you've spent years learning peace. When the storms have passed, and all you want now is calm weather. Edith was 73. She had been alone for 10 years after a difficult divorce. She told herself she had healed. And when she met someone new, it felt hopeful. They laughed over pasta, took evening walks through the neighborhood, talked late into the night like teenagers rediscovering connection. She felt alive again. But slowly, almost invisibly, the shift began. He questioned how she spent her mornings, criticized how she organized her day, called her 3, 4, sometimes 5 times before lunch. What she first saw as interest became intrusion. What began as affection felt more like monitoring. And one night, after another exhausting phone call where she explained, once again, why she didn't text back fast enough, she sat on the edge of her bed, tears welling not from heartbreak, but from sheer fatigue. And she whispered something I'll never forget. I don't think I'm lonely. I think I just forgot how peaceful alone can feel. She ended the relationship a week later. No fight, no grand speech, just a quiet return to herself. She told me later it felt like finally getting a full night's sleep after years of tossing and turning. That's the part most people miss. We talk so much about the joy of companionship, but not enough about the intimacy of peace. Not enough about how at this stage of life being unbothered is its form of love. Sometimes, the most sacred relationship you can have is the one where no one's raising their voice, where no one is waiting for an apology, where no one is keeping score. Just you, your space, and a silence that doesn't hurt, it heals. That's not loneliness, that's clarity. And for many men and women over 65, it's the most beautiful chapter of all. Second love costs more than you think, financially. They say love is priceless. But if you're over altmishbesh, you know better, because by now you've lived enough to understand love might be free to feel, but it's never free to keep, especially not at this stage. In your 30s, you could afford a few missteps, pick up the tab, split rent, buy gifts to impress and still bounce back next month. But after retirement, every dollar has weight, not just in your wallet, but in your peace of mind. Every expense touches something deeper now, your stability, your safety, your future. And yet, so many men still walk into late-in-life relationships without asking the one question they never dared to ask before. Can I afford to love her? Roger was 68, a retired contractor, careful with money, owned his home outright, had savings, a pension, and a small cabin by the lake. Life was simple, clean, predictable. Then he reconnected with Marla, a woman he knew from high school. She had a softness to her, a kindness, a spark he hadn't felt in years. They reconnected over coffee, then dinners, then the weekends away. 6 months in, she moved in, and everything changed. Suddenly, his grocery bill doubled. Trips increased. Utilities climbed. She liked to shop online, preferred name brands, booked spontaneous weekends just to keep things exciting. Oh, when he brought it up, she smiled and said, "But you're doing well, right?" He said, "Yes." But what he wanted to say was, "I was doing well before I had to fund someone else's lifestyle." Here's what most people won't tell you. At this stage of life, money isn't just about lifestyle. It's about longevity. It's about making sure your final decades are lived with dignity, not desperation. When you're 30, you can recover from bad spending. When you're Dega Thregan, you might not get the chance. Love, no matter how sincere, comes with costs. And unless both people bring financial responsibility to the table, one person always ends up paying the price. Often silently, often bitterly, and often too late to undo. Staying single doesn't mean you're cheap. It means you're awake. It means you know that protecting your retirement isn't selfish, it's self-respect. Roger eventually asked Marla to move out. It wasn't because he stopped loving her. It was because he started loving himself again. And that was a decision no bank account could measure. Third, you've earned your routine. Don't surrender it. After all das to endes, your routine isn't just a habit. It's a lifeline. It's not just what you do. It's who you've become. After decades of trying to please everyone else, you spent your youth adjusting for a boss, your middle years sacrificing for a family. And now you wake up when your body tells you to not the alarm. You read the paper with real focus. You drink your coffee slowly. You water your plants. Walk at your pace. Cook what you like. Leave the dishes if you want, because for the first time, no one's telling you what to do. And that freedom, it's not just convenience, it's dignity. But bring someone new into your life, even someone you care about, and the slow, beautiful rhythm you've built can start to slip. Earl, 71, had a lovely life. Lived alone in a small home by the river. His mornings were sacred. Classical music, crossword puzzles, one egg, one slice of toast, one perfect hour of quiet. Then he met Denise. They fell in love slowly. She moved in after a year, and that's when the little things started to shift. She didn't like silence in the morning. She wanted to talk. She rearranged the kitchen to her flow, started cooking breakfast early, and expected him to join. And when he said he preferred his own rhythm, she looked hurt. Not angry, not malicious, but hurt enough that he gave in. And that's how it begins. Not with a scream, but with a sigh, a small compromise, followed by another, until the life that once fit you perfectly starts to feel like a borrowed coat, warm, but no longer yours. Here's what people forget. At this age, peace doesn't come from grand adventure. It comes from the known, the reliable, the routine that wraps around your day like a soft, familiar blanket. When you give that up even for love, you risk losing the most precious thing you've earned. Control. Control over your day, your pace, your privacy. And once it's gone, it's hard to get back. Earl eventually asked Denise to move out, not because he didn't care for her, but because he missed himself. He missed his mornings, his flow, his space, his freedom. And he learned something important that day. When you've spent a lifetime adjusting for others, there comes a time when the greatest act of love is choosing not to adjust anymore. And that's okay, because peace is not selfish. It's sacred, and your routine might be the quietest but clearest expression of who you really are. Fourth, the caregiver trap. When you're young, taking care of someone can feel romantic, sweet, purposeful. But after FEMOG trades, it can feel like quicksand, because at this stage of life, you're not a nurse, you're not a chauffeur, you're not a medication manager. You're a man who finally has time to breathe, to slow down, to live, not just serve. But when love walks in with health issues tucked quietly behind the smile, you might not see the weight coming until it's already on your back. George was 76. He met Ruth at church. Soft voice, strong faith, gentle smile. They started slow. She brought him banana bread. He offered to fix her garden light. 2 months later, they were inseparable. She moved in that fall. And then it began. First, it was back pain. Then blood pressure meets. Then doctor's appointments. George drove, took notes, picked up prescriptions, cooked meals low in sodium. At first he told himself, this is what love looks like. But 3 months in, he stopped going fishing, stopped calling his old friends, started waking at 2 a.m. to check if she was breathing okay. By spring, he was cancelling his physical therapy appointments so she could make hers. And one morning as he sat on the porch staring out into the fog, he whispered, I'm not living anymore. I'm just managing someone else's decline. Not out of cruelty, not out of coldness, but out of truth. Because caregiving isn't just an act of love. It's labor, real labor, unpaid, unplanned, unrelenting. And for many men, especially those with health conditions of their own, it's more than they can carry. But they carry it anyway. Because men don't complain. They endure until their bodies collapse, or their spirit does. But here's the truth, no one says out loud, you can be compassionate and still protect your peace. You can care deeply and still say, this isn't sustainable. George eventually helped Ruth transition to her daughter's care. It broke his heart, but it saved his life. He still visits her, still brings flowers, but he does it as a man in balance, not a man drowning in silent duty. If you're over 65 and considering a relationship, ask yourself honestly, am I stepping into love or into a role I'm no longer strong enough to carry? Because loving someone doesn't mean becoming their solution, and staying single might be the only way you preserve the little strength you have left for your final chapter, not to be selfish, but to stay standing. And there is no shame in choosing that. Fifth, family drama you didn't ask for. You think it's just between the two of you. Two grown adults, finding companionship in the later years of life. What could be more simple, more innocent than that? But if you're over 65 and thinking of starting a new relationship, think again. Because love at this stage rarely comes alone. It brings baggage, not always from the partner, sometimes from your children, sometimes from theirs, sometimes from the paperwork no one talks about until it's too late. Martha was 66 when she met Paul, a retired history teacher, charming, thoughtful, widowed. They shared a love for books, jazz, and old black and white films. To her, it felt like fate. To her children, it felt like a threat. Her oldest son asked if she was being manipulated. Her daughter asked for copies of her will, just in case. One Thanksgiving dinner turned into a courtroom, questions flying like accusations. Do you even know his financial history? Is he after the house? What happens to Dad's pension if you remarry? Suddenly, love wasn't romantic. It was political, strategic. And she found herself standing in the middle of a family battlefield, holding a white flag she never intended to raise. This isn't just about suspicion, it's about structure. Because relationships after femoktreds don't just affect feelings. They affect government benefits, veteran pensions, health, careproxius, wills, property inheritance, long-term care decisions, one new name on a bank account, and the entire balance of your legacy can shift. Even if you don't marry, the perception of a partner can spark legal questions and emotional fallout you never saw coming. Here's the quiet truth. Most men over 65 won't say out loud. They don't avoid relationships because they fear love. They avoid them because they're tired of drama, tired of defending their choices, tired of having to explain who they spend time with to grown adults who call them dad, but treat them like a child. So they choose solitude, not out of bitterness, but out of emotional preservation, because sometimes keeping the peace with your family means keeping your private life sacred. And there's no shame in that. Staying single doesn't mean closing your heart. It means keeping your house and your affairs in order. It means protecting your legacy, and maybe more importantly, protecting your peace. Sixth, freedom is the one thing you've earned and deserve. There's a certain kind of freedom you don't understand until you've earned it. It's not the freedom of youth, not the freedom of recklessness. It's not the loud kind that runs, roars, or rebels. The kind of freedom you earn after 65 is quiet, simple, sacred. It looks like this: waking up without an alarm, eating breakfast when you're hungry, not when someone else is ready. Reading a book without interruption. Taking a nap because you can. Watching the sunset without explaining why you're emotional. It's the freedom to exist on your own terms. And for many men, that kind of freedom didn't come easy. They spent decades being providers, protectors, peacemakers. They sacrificed sleep so others could rest. They worked overtime so bills got paid. They held their tongues so arguments didn't start. And now they have a little space, a little stillness, a little room to breathe. Then someone walks in with charm and need and expectations. And slowly, without malice, your life begins to shrink again. Not because she's controlling, but because sharing a life means sharing time, sharing energy, sharing space. And whether you realize it or not, that means giving up something. For Walter, 74, it was travel. He had one dream left, to ride the train across the Pacific Northwest, just like his father once did. He saved for it, planned it, even bought the ticket. Then she said, "Can't we do something closer to home?" So he postponed, then cancelled, then gave up the idea entirely. Why? Because he didn't want to disappoint her, but in doing so, he disappointed himself. He didn't blame her. She didn't ask for anything unreasonable. But the moment he sacrificed that dream, he knew something inside him had quietly folded. It's not that she stopped me. It's that I forgot I didn't need permission anymore. That's the power of freedom. It's fragile. And if you don't protect it even from love, you can lose it before you realize it's gone. Staying single isn't always about being alone. Sometimes, it's about being available to yourself, fully, unapologetically. You eat when you're hungry, sleep when you're tired, speak when you're ready, and move through your days without negotiating every detail. And that isn't selfish. It's sovereign. You've given enough, compromised enough, adjusted enough, and now finally your life gets to be yours, completely. Seventh, settling out of fear is still settling. There's a moment, usually sometime after 65, when a man sits in his chair, coffee cooling beside him, and thinks, "Is this it? Will I die alone?" It doesn't always come as panic. Sometimes it whispers, in the silence of an empty house, in the ache of a long winter evening, in the sound of a spoon clinking against one teacup instead of two. And that's when the fear sets in, not of death, but of loneliness, of irrelevance, of being forgotten. So when someone comes along, anyone, who seems kind, who texts back, who laughs at your jokes, who asks how your day was, it's tempting, dangerously tempting to hold on, even if the connection feels hollow, even if something inside you whispers, "This isn't it." Because fear is a powerful salesman, and it can make even the most self-aware man believe, maybe this is my last chance. Barbara, 69, once told me, "I didn't fall in love with him. I fell in fear of being alone." She stayed in that relationship for 9 months. He was polite, predictable, present, but not alive, not curious, not connected. She went to dinners, but felt like a ghost, went on walks, but missed walking alone, listened to his stories, but couldn't remember them, because her heart, it was never really in it. And when she finally left, she didn't cry. She exhaled, deep, long, like someone who had just escaped a quiet cage. That's the cost of settling. It doesn't ruin your life in big, dramatic ways. It just dulls it, softens the color, flattens the days. You wake up beside someone and feel more alone than you did before they came. And deep down, you know, I didn't choose this because I loved them. I chose this because I didn't love the alternative. But here's the truth. Being alone is not failure, and being partnered is not proof you're worthy. Sometimes, the most dignified decision a man can make is to wait, to walk alone a little longer, to trust that peace, even in solitude, is better than presence built on fear, because fear will always tell you to settle. But your soul, it's asking for something real, and if that never comes, then at least you'll know you didn't trade your truth for company, and you didn't give away your final years for the sake of not feeling alone at dinner. You've lived long enough to know that love, real love, is rare. And peace? Even rarer. When you were young, being single felt like waiting for the right one, waiting to be seen, to be chosen, to be loved. But now at this stage in life something shifts. You're not waiting anymore. You're choosing, and that's the difference no one talks about. You're not single because no one wanted you. You're single because you finally stopped giving yourself away for cheap. You stopped shrinking your world to fit someone else's mood. You stopped handing over your time, your money, your sleep, your strength, just to avoid the sound of your own breathing at night. And you realized that silence isn't loneliness. It's space. For clarity, for dignity, for mornings that begin with stillness and nights that end in peace. For reading what you want, eating when you want, being exactly who you are without needing to explain it to anyone. You earned this chapter. With every compromise you made in the past, with every person you took care of, with every time you stayed when you should have left. So now, you don't owe anyone your presence. You don't owe anyone your peace. And you certainly don't owe anyone your final years. You get to choose. And if that choice is solitude, then may it be the kind that feels like freedom, not absence, but arrival, not loneliness, but wholeness. Because the truth is, you're not alone. You're with yourself. And finally, that's enough.